The ground beneath your feet is solid. That is the unspoken bargain of human existence. Even on death worlds, where the atmosphere burns and the fauna hunts with intelligence, the Earth itself remains fundamentally inert. Rock does not think. Stone does not hunger. The surface you stand upon will not suddenly decide to consume you. On Excavatum 7, that bargain does not exist. The miners who work this world know a truth that contradicts every instinct evolution gave them. The rock is not solid. The darkness below holds something that has made the Earth itself an extension of its hunting territory. And every strike of a pickaxe, every footfall in a tunnel, every dropped tool or shouted warning sends information downward to creatures that have evolved to interpret vibration the way human eyes interpret light. This is life on an Ambull-infested mining world, a place where the Imperium extracts resources by sending human beings into conditions that violate the most basic assumptions about physical reality. Excavatum 7 occupies the outer edge of the Damocles Gulf, classified as a secondary tier resource extraction site in Imperial administrative records. The planet possesses substantial deposits of adamantium ore in its upper crust, along with veins of promethium trapped in sedimentary layers approximately 3 kilometers below the surface. By Imperial standards, this makes it valuable, but not irreplaceable. Thousands of worlds produce similar yields across the galaxy. What makes Excavatum 7 distinctive is not its resources, but its native fauna. The planet's ecological history remains poorly documented. No Administratum survey team conducted comprehensive xenobiological research before mining operations began. Initial scans detected massive tunnel networks throughout the planetary crust, but attributed them to natural geological formations. Only after the first deaths did the truth become apparent. The tunnels were not natural. They were excavated by organisms that had been burrowing through Excavatum 7's crust for millions of years before human beings arrived. Embulls are classified as burrowing xenos category Sigma in Imperial threat assessments. They stand approximately 4 meters tall when fully upright, though they typically move in a hunched posture that brings their armored heads closer to the ground. 4 massive limbs end in claws capable of pulverizing stone. Their bodies are covered in segmented carapace plates that have evolved to withstand tremendous compression forces. They do not possess eyes. Their sensory organs detect vibrations through specialized organs distributed along their thorax and limbs. An ambull can sense a human heartbeat through 30 meters of solid rock. The creatures are not intelligent in any sense that would qualify them for Xenos Majoria classification. They do not build, do not communicate through language, do not demonstrate strategic thinking beyond immediate predatory behavior. But they are exquisitely adapted to their hunting environment. They navigate through stone as efficiently as humans walk through air. They can remain motionless for weeks, metabolic processes slowed to near dormancy, waiting for vibrations that signal prey moving overhead. And they are territorial in the way that apex predators are territorial. They do not flee from threats. They eliminate them. The first mining team on Excavatum 7 lost 43 workers in the initial contact. The survivors' reports described the ground itself erupting, stone and metal shredding, as claws longer than a man's arm tore upward through what had been considered reinforced flooring. The creatures that emerged did not hesitate, did not pause to assess their targets. They simply killed with mechanical efficiency until nothing in the immediate area continued to produce vibrations. That was 60 years ago. Mining operations have continued ever since. Imperial resource extraction operates according to principles that prioritize yield over safety when the two considerations conflict. This is not cruelty, it is mathematics. Excavatum-7 produces approximately 47,000 metric tons of refined adamantium per Terran year, along with 12 million barrels of promethium from its deeper reserves. These resources support the construction of Imperial Navy vessels, the production of ammunition for guard regiments across 3 subsectors, and the maintenance of night suits for House Kaeradok on the neighboring feudal world of Valdane III. Replacing those resources would require locating, surveying, and establishing operations on an alternative world. The process typically consumes between 15 and 30 years. During that interval, the resources currently provided by Excavatum-7 would need to come from other sources, creating shortfalls that cascade through supply chains. The Departamento Munitorum assessed these factors when determining whether to abandon Excavatum-7 after the initial Ambull attacks. Their conclusion appears in Planning Document Reference Delta 7912, filed in the year. Projected losses to workforce acceptable within replacement parameters. Mining operations to continue with modified protocols. Modified protocols consist of 3 categories of regulation. First, all mining activities restricted to designated safe zones, mapped areas where Ambull tunnel networks have not been detected by ground-penetrating augur scans. These zones shift as new tunnels are discovered, typically shrinking available work areas by 7 to 12% each decade. Second, mandatory vibration dampening equipment installed in all active mining facilities. Power tools modified to reduce resonance. Workers required to walk on rubberized mats when moving through tunnels. Communications limited to short-range Vox rather than loudspeakers. Third, weapons training for all able-bodied workers. Every mining team includes at least 2 members equipped with industrial meltaguns. Emergency protocols dictate that upon Ambull breach, these armed workers engage the creature while others evacuate. The protocols reduce casualties by approximately 40% compared to the first decade of operations. They do not eliminate them. Current average annual mortality rate from Ambull attacks, 312 workers. Current average annual workforce, 9,400. The ratio satisfies Imperial efficiency standards for hostile environment resource extraction. From the perspective of someone reviewing statistics in an administratum data file, these numbers represent acceptable optimization. From the perspective of someone standing in a tunnel 3 kilometers below the surface, listening to stone grind against stone, somewhere in the darkness beyond the lumen strip's reach, they represent something else entirely. Workers reach the mining zones through a network of reinforced shafts that descend from the planetary surface to the operational depths. The shafts were constructed during the first year of mining operations, drilled through solid bedrock and lined with plasteel and ceramite. They represent the single most expensive infrastructure investment on Excavatum-7. The descent takes 43 minutes via the primary lift platforms. Workers board in groups of 30, standing in silence as the platform drops through 5 kilometers of rock at controlled speeds designed to minimize vibration transfer. Emergency protocols forbid speaking during the descent. Even conversation produces vibrations that propagate through the lift mechanism into the surrounding stone. The silence is not peaceful. It is the silence of suppressed fear. During my research into Excavatum-7 operations, I accessed testimony from a worker named Veran Holst. His account appears in the Memetic archive maintained by the Adeptus Ministorum for confession purposes. Workers on Excavatum 7 frequently record confessions, a practice encouraged by the overseers as psychological maintenance. The recordings are not reviewed unless a worker is flagged for behavioral concerns. Holst described his first descent into the operational zones. You can feel it before you see anything. The air changes, gets colder, but also heavier somehow, like it's pressing on your chest, and you start thinking about the weight, all that rock above you, all that rock below you. And somewhere in between, you're just this little soft thing that could be erased if the stone decided to close up. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is knowing it's not the stone you should be worried about. It's what lives in the stone. What's down there, waiting. You can't see them, can't hear them, but they can sense you. Every heartbeat, every breath. It's like shouting into the dark and waiting to see if something shouts back. The lift platforms reach the operational zones and open onto primary junctions, reinforced chambers where workers receive their daily assignments. These junctions are among the few spaces where normal conversation is permitted, though most workers still speak in lowered voices. Habit or superstition, the distinction becomes meaningless after enough time underground. From the junctions, workers proceed to their designated work sites through secondary tunnels. These tunnels are narrower, minimally reinforced, following veins of valuable ore through natural fault lines and excavated passages. The walls show marks where previous workers have scratched prayers to the Emperor. Some of these prayers date back decades. Others were added yesterday. One scratched message, recorded in a surveyor's photographic log. He protects, but the stone does not care. Adamantium extraction requires specialized equipment. The ore exists in veins ranging from 3 centimeters to 2 meters in width, embedded in surrounding basalt and granite. Standard mining procedure involves using plasma cutters to separate ore-bearing rock from its matrix, then extracting the ore itself through pulverization and chemical processing. On Excavatum 7, plasma cutters are forbidden. The intense heat and vibration they produce travels through rock with exceptional efficiency. Using one is effectively broadcasting your location to every ambull within a kilometer radius. Instead, workers use hand tools, chisels made from hardened ceramite, hammers weighted to deliver maximum force with minimum reverberation. The work is slow, physically exhausting, and produces yields approximately 1/10 of what automated or plasma-based extraction would achieve. Quotas remain unchanged. Each worker is assigned a section of tunnel and expected to extract a minimum quantity of ore per shift. Shifts last 16 hours. Breaks are scheduled every 4 hours and last 20 minutes. During breaks, workers must remain in their assigned sections. Leaving the area requires movement through tunnels, and movement produces vibration. The work develops its own rhythm. Strike the chisel. Listen. Wait. Strike again. The gaps between impacts are not laziness. They are survival. Sound travels, then dissipates. Waiting allows the vibrations from one strike to fade before introducing new ones. Workers develop an intuitive sense for timing, a feeling for how long each blow takes to finish echoing through the surrounding stone. Some workers describe entering a meditative state during the work. The repetitive motion, the enforced silence, the constant low-level alertness, it produces a kind of hyper-focus. You stop thinking about anything except the immediate task. The next strike, the next pause, the next fragment of ore. Others find the work psychologically unbearable, The administratum records show that approximately 18% of new workers request transfer within their first month. These requests are denied. Labor contracts on Excavatum 7 are binding for minimum terms of 5 years. The only legal exit is death or permanent incapacitation. The illegal exits happen frequently. Workers who attempt to stow away on supply ships. Workers who simply walk out into the planetary surface's hostile environment without proper equipment. Workers who take their assigned vibro chisel and open their own throats, rather than spend another shift in the darkness, waiting to hear if the next sound will be stone. Grinding against stone as something massive moves through the earth toward them. These deaths are classified as non-operational losses and do not appear in Ambull-related casualty statistics. Workers live in habitation blocks constructed on the planetary surface, approximately 8 kilometers from the primary shaft entrance. The habs are standard Imperial design, prefabricated plasteel structures arranged in grid patterns, each unit housing between 4 and 6 workers. Amenities are minimal but functional. Sleeping pallets, communal washing facilities, a central dining hall that serves 2 meals per day. The habs are quiet at night, not silent. Humans make noise simply by existing. Breathing, moving, the occasional conversation between workers too exhausted to sleep immediately. But compared to equivalent facilities on other mining worlds, the volume level is notably low. Workers on Excavatum 7 do not celebrate after shifts. They do not gather in large groups to drink, gamble, or engage in the other recreational activities common to isolated industrial populations. They rest, and they wait for their next shift. The psychological impact of constant threat produces measurable behavioral changes. A study conducted by a visiting medici researcher from the Ufficio Medici Generalis documented elevated levels of baseline cortisol in 94% of tested workers. Chronic stress responses manifesting in suppressed immune function, accelerated aging markers, increased incidence of cardiovascular disorders. The same study noted that workers who survived longer than 2 years began exhibiting different patterns. Their cortisol levels stabilized, but at permanently elevated baselines. Their startle responses became both more sensitive and more controlled. They developed hypervigilance as a default state rather than a stress response. The researcher described this as adaptive traumatization, the process by which human neurology adjusts to sustained threat environments by normalizing what should be abnormal. The brain recalibrates. Fear stops being an acute emotion and becomes ambient background noise. Workers who reach this state are more productive. They work faster, react more efficiently during emergencies, and demonstrate lower rates of psychological breakdown. The administratum notes this in workforce optimization reports. Workers who survive beyond the 2-year threshold represent valuable assets. They have been refined by exposure to danger into more efficient instruments of resource extraction. No one celebrates when a worker reaches their 2-year anniversary. Every active mining zone maintains a network of vibration sensors embedded in the surrounding rock. These sensors detect seismic activity and differentiate between normal mining operations and the distinctive signature of Ambull movement. Ambulls do not move like humans. They do not walk. They flow through stone, using their claws to displace material in a wave-like motion that creates specific frequency patterns. The sensors recognize these patterns and trigger alert protocols when detected within threatening proximity. The alarms are simple, klaxons that emit 3 sharp bursts, followed by silence, repeated every 5 seconds. The silence between bursts is intentional. It allows workers to hear what might be coming. Protocol upon hearing the alarm: cease all activity immediately. Remain perfectly still. Do not move. Do not speak. Do not drop tools. The alarm indicates an ambull has been detected, but detection does not mean the creature has identified your specific location. It may be passing through adjacent tunnels, hunting something else, or simply patrolling its territory. If you remain motionless, you become invisible to its sensory organs. The ambull senses vibration, not static pressure. A human standing completely still produces minimal seismic signature. A human running produces a signal that draws attention like blood in water. The waiting period after an alarm typically lasts between 8 and 40 minutes. Workers stand frozen in whatever position they occupied when the klaxon sounded. Arms extended mid-swing, backs bent over ore deposits, bodies contorted into postures that become agonizing to maintain as minutes stretch into quarters of an hour. Cramping muscles produce tremors. Tremors produce vibrations. Workers who cannot maintain stillness are instructed to lie flat on the tunnel floor and press themselves against rubberized mats designed to dampen movement. Sometimes the alarm ends. The ambull passes through the area without breaching into the work zones. Sensors confirm it has moved beyond threat radius. A different tone sounds. Single, long note, indicating all clear. Workers resume operations, though productivity inevitably drops in the hours following an alarm. Hands shake. Breathing remains shallow and rapid. The body does not immediately relinquish its fear. Sometimes the alarm does not end with the all-clear signal. Sometimes it ends with the sound of stone cracking. The vibration-dampened floor suddenly fracturing as something rises from below, moving with speed that contradicts its mass. Claws emerging first, then the armored head, then the full body unfolding into the tunnel like a nightmare made solid. Protocol in this scenario: designated armed workers engage immediately, while others evacuate. The meltaguns carried by security personnel can kill an ambull, but only with sustained fire to vulnerable areas between carapace segments. The creatures do not die quickly, and they do not stop attacking while they die. Evacuation means running, and running means producing maximum vibration, signaling to any other ambulls in the area that prey is in motion. Most breaches result in multiple casualties before the situation is contained. The initial victims killed by the breaching ambull, secondary victims killed by additional ambulls attracted by the vibrations of fleeing workers, tertiary victims crushed in tunnel collapses caused by the creature's emergence through structural supports. Average duration of a breach incident: 12 minutes. Average casualties: between 7 and 15 workers. The numbers are precise because the administratum requires detailed incident reports for resource reallocation purposes. Workers who survive an ambull encounter develop specific characteristics. The medical researcher mentioned earlier noted these patterns in her observations. They do not speak about the incidents afterward. Not refusal. Silence. The experience does not translate into words in a way that feels meaningful. How do you describe watching the ground you trusted become vertical teeth? How do you articulate the moment you understood that your most fundamental assumptions about physical reality were conditional, subject to violent revocation? They develop obsessive monitoring behaviors, checking structural integrity of floors multiple times per hour, pressing ears against walls to listen for movement beyond normal range of human hearing, counting heartbeats to ensure their rhythm remains low and steady, minimizing the signal their body transmits through the earth. They begin to walk differently. Shorter steps, weight distributed more evenly, conscious control of every movement to reduce impact force. It becomes unconscious after enough time. Their entire kinesthetic sense recalibrates around the principle of minimal vibration. Some become valuable mentors for new workers. They understand the danger intuitively, can teach others how to move, how to work, how to recognize the subtle signs that precede an alarm. The way dust sometimes shifts in still air when something large displaces material underground. Others become liabilities. Hypervigilance crosses into paranoia. They hear threats that do not exist, see danger in every shadow, refuse to work in sections that feel wrong according to criteria they cannot articulate. The administratum classifies these workers as psychologically compromised and reassigns them to surface duties if their productivity drops below acceptable thresholds. And some continue working with apparent normalcy, showing no outward signs of trauma, maintaining quotas, following protocols. Then, one day, they simply stop, stand in place, set down their tools, and refuse to move. Not in protest, not in anger. They have reached some internal threshold that their conscious mind cannot identify, but their body will no longer cross. These workers are removed from duty and sent to the planetary Medikey facilities for evaluation. Most are diagnosed with acute stress response and administered sedation. After a recovery period, they are returned to duty or transferred to less critical positions, depending on medical assessment. The recovered workers rarely last more than a few weeks before exhibiting the same behavior. The second time, they are typically classified as permanently unfit for mining operations and either reassigned to basic surface maintenance or recommended for penal servitude if their contract terms have not been fulfilled. The cycle suggests something that Imperial psychological doctrine does not easily accommodate. The human organism possesses limits that cannot be extended through conditioning or chemical intervention. Expose it to sufficient threat for sufficient duration, and something fundamental breaks. Not catastrophically, not with obvious symptoms, but irrevocably. There is an unspoken understanding among workers on Excavatum 7. No one discusses it openly. No overseer acknowledges it. But every person who has worked below ground for more than a year knows it to be true. The Imperium could eliminate the Ambull threat. Orbital bombardment would sterilize the upper crust. Virus bombs would penetrate the tunnel networks and destroy all biological matter within. Cyclonic torpedoes would crack the planet's surface and expose the deeper layers to void temperature conditions that no organism could survive. Any of these options would end the Ambull presence on Excavatum 7 permanently. They would also destroy the mining infrastructure, collapse the tunnels, render the adamantium deposits inaccessible, turn the planet into a lifeless rock with resources locked beneath a surface too damaged to excavate economically. Starting over would cost more than the current acceptable loss model. And so the work continues. Human beings descend into the earth knowing that the danger could be eliminated, but will not be, because the mathematics of imperial resource management have determined that their lives cost less than the disruption to supply chains. This is not cruelty. This is priority allocation in an empire spanning 1 million worlds and managing threats that range from xenos invasions to demonic incursions. Individual human lives cannot outweigh strategic resource considerations. To argue otherwise is to misunderstand the scale at which the Imperium operates. The workers understand this intellectually. They recite the imperial truth when required. The Emperor protects, and those who serve him accept the duties assigned to them. They take the sacrament, attend mandatory devotional services, and maintain the outward forms of faith. But in the tunnels, 3 kilometers down, standing motionless while the alarm screams and the stone grinds somewhere close enough to feel through your boots, in that moment, the intellectual understanding does not matter. In that moment, you are simply a piece of meat waiting to learn if the earth will open beneath you. Excavatum 7's mining operations are managed by a cadre of overseers appointed by the administratum. These individuals do not work in the tunnels. They do not descend to operational depths. Their duties consist of monitoring productivity, maintaining equipment, ensuring supply chains remain functional, and enforcing quotas. They occupy their own habitation facilities, separated from worker habs by 4 kilometers and a perimeter fence. Their quarters include amenities not available to general workforce: climate control, private sleeping chambers, recreational facilities, including a small library and chapel. The overseers are not deliberately cruel. They do not take pleasure in worker deaths. They simply operate according to different priorities. Their performance is evaluated based on resource yield, operational efficiency, and cost management. Worker welfare appears in their evaluation criteria, but as a secondary consideration subordinate to production targets. From their perspective, the mining operation is successful. Yields meet projections. Casualty rates remain within acceptable parameters. Infrastructure maintenance costs have actually declined over the past decade as protocols have been refined and workers have developed more efficient risk avoidance behaviors. They file reports that present Excavatum 7 as a model of effective, hostile environment resource extraction. Several overseers have received commendations and been promoted to more prestigious positions, managing operations on other worlds. None of them have ever heard an Ambull alarm while standing in a tunnel 3 kilometers underground. This distance, not physical, but experiential, creates a fundamental disconnect. The overseers know about the danger intellectually. They review casualty reports, authorize replacement workers, implement new safety protocols when incident rates exceed thresholds. But they do not know the danger. They have not stood frozen for 30 minutes while their muscles cramped and their mind screamed at them to run, knowing that running means death. The workers understand this. They do not hate the overseers exactly. Hatred requires seeing the target as a willful agent of suffering. The overseers are not agents. They are components in an administrative system, functioning according to their design specifications. If you replace them with different individuals, nothing would change. The quotas would remain. The acceptable loss ratios would remain. The decision that worker lives cost less than infrastructure reconstruction would remain. The system does not require cruelty to produce suffering. It only requires optimization. Workers on Excavatum 7 attend devotional services every 7 days, as mandated by imperial standard across all human-inhabited worlds. The services are conducted by preacher Matthias Gorl, a missionary from the Adeptus Ministorum, assigned to the mining operation 6 years ago. Gorl is elderly by imperial standards, 68 Terran years, and bears the physical markers of a life spent on harsh worlds. Augmented lungs replaced after exposure to toxic atmospheric conditions on a previous assignment. Scarred hands from manual labor during his youth as an underhive laborer on Necromunda. He conducts services in the communal chapel, a bare plasteel structure with enough seating for 200 workers. Attendance is mandatory, but enforcement is minimal. Most workers attend anyway, not from fear of punishment, but because the service provides structure, a rhythm, something that breaks the monotony of work-sleep-work cycles. Goral's sermons do not follow standard ministorum templates. He does not speak of the Emperor's glory or humanity's manifest destiny to claim the galaxy. His theology is simpler, darker, more honest than official doctrine typically permits. From a sermon recorded in the chapel's audio archive, dated M42, you have learned what the Imperium does not teach in catechism, that the Emperor's protection is not a shield that prevents all harm. It is the strength to endure harm without breaking. The ground beneath you is not solid. You know this. You live with this knowledge every hour of every day. The theologians would tell you to have faith that the Emperor will not allow the stone to open. But you have seen the stone open. You have seen your brothers die. Faith is not believing impossible things. Faith is continuing to serve even when you know the truth. Even when you know that your life is measured in acceptable losses and supply chain calculations. Even when you know that you may die today, tomorrow, or 20 years from now, and the only difference will be a number in a file somewhere. The Emperor protects, but he does not promise safety. He promises only that your suffering will have meaning, that the adamantium you extract will armor a ship that defends a world, that the promethium you refine will fuel a tank that breaks a xenos siege, that your life, spent here in the darkness, purchases something larger than yourself. This is the bargain. This has always been the bargain. You are not asked to be happy. You are not asked to be safe. You are asked to serve until service is no longer possible. And when the ground opens and the darkness rises and your time ends, that too is service, because the workers who survive will remember, will learn, will become more careful, more efficient, more capable of continuing the work. The Emperor protects. Not you specifically, not me, but humanity, the whole, the eternal, and we are the price of that protection. The workers listen in silence. Some find comfort in Goral's words. The explicit acknowledgement of their expendability, paradoxically, makes it more bearable. The lie that their lives matter to the Imperium would be insulting. The truth that their deaths matter, that their suffering purchases something real, offers a framework for endurance. Others hear only confirmation of what they already knew. They sit through the sermon because it is required, then return to their habs and mark another 7 days survived. And a few hear something different. Hear the gap between what Goral says and what official doctrine teaches. Wonder about the implications of a faith that promises only meaning, not salvation. These workers do not speak their thoughts aloud, but the thoughts exist nonetheless. Questions once formed do not disappear simply because answering them would be dangerous. Imperial labor contracts are binding across generations. A worker who dies before fulfilling their contract term passes the remaining obligation to their next of kin. This is standard practice across all Imperial industries, justified as ensuring the stability of long-term resource extraction operations. Excavatum 7 does not permit children in the mining zones. Workers who produce offspring send them to Imperial Schola facilities on nearby worlds, where they receive basic education and indoctrination before being assigned to their inherited labor contracts upon reaching working age. The children return to Excavatum 7 at age 16. They arrive on supply ships, often in groups of 20 or 30, accompanied by administratum clerks who verify their identities and assign them to habitation blocks. They have been raised in institutions, taught to read, to perform basic mathematics, to recite the Imperial Catechism. They have been shown picked recordings of what mining work entails. They understand, intellectually, that they are going to spend years extracting ore from beneath a planet's surface. They do not understand what it means to stand in a tunnel while the alarm sounds. The first month after a new group arrives, productivity drops across all work teams. Experienced workers must divert attention to training the newcomers, teaching them how to move, how to listen, how to recognize the signs that precede danger. The mortality rate for new workers during their first year, 23%, higher than the baseline casualty rate by a factor of nearly 5. They make mistakes, move too quickly, drop tools, fail to recognize vibration patterns that veteran workers read instinctively. Some die in their first week. The experienced workers try not to learn their names. Those who survive the first year begin to understand. Their movements become controlled. Their awareness sharpens. They stop asking questions about why the work must be done this way, why they cannot simply use more efficient equipment, why the Imperium does not eliminate the Ambull threat. They stop asking because they have learned what every worker eventually learns. The questions do not matter. The answers do not change anything. The only relevant question is how to survive the next shift. And gradually, they stop being children. Not because they age. 16 is already nearly adult by Imperial standards, but because something inside them hardens. The part of the psyche that believes in safety, in fairness, in the possibility that the world might be other than it is. That part dies quietly, without ceremony, worn away by accumulated fear until nothing remains except the knowledge that the ground is not solid and never will be again. Administratum records maintain detailed documentation of all significant incidents on Excavatum 7. The logs are not classified, but neither are they widely distributed. They exist primarily for actuarial purposes, providing data for risk assessment models and resource allocation algorithms. I accessed these logs through standard Administratum query protocols. The records span 60 years, beginning with the initial mining operations and continuing through present day. Each incident is described in standardized format: date, time, location, number of casualties, cause of death, estimated resource impact. The clinical language strips away everything except the mechanics of dying. Incident 127A, dated 8/4/41. Ambull breach in tunnel section 7G during third shift. 5 workers killed by primary contact. 3 additional workers killed during evacuation. 1 security officer killed while engaging hostile. Tunnel section 7G sealed pending structural assessment. Estimated production delay: 4 days. Incident 394C, dated 9/41. Catastrophic tunnel collapse in Deep Mining Zone 3 following Ambull activity in adjacent tunnels. 17 workers trapped. Recovery operations determined unfeasible due to instability of surrounding rock. Section sealed. Estimated resource loss: 7,000 man-hours of specialized labor. Incident 681F, dated 9/31/M41. Multiple Ambull breach during shift transition in Primary Junction Delta. 23 casualties before security forces contained hostiles. 4 additional casualties from friendly fire during engagement. Junction structural integrity compromised. Temporary closure implemented. Pending repair. Estimated production delay: 12 days. The logs contain 2,000 documented incidents over 60 years. The number does not include minor injuries, psychological casualties, or deaths from non-Ambull causes, such as equipment failure or standard mining accidents. 2,847 times the ground opened. 2,847 times workers died or were injured badly enough to require medical intervention. And 2,847 times the administratum recorded the event, calculated its impact on production schedules, and authorized continuation of operations. Reading through the logs produces a kind of cognitive dissonance. Each individual incident appears manageable. 5 deaths here, 17 there, 23 in a larger breach. No single event catastrophic enough to justify halting operations. But the accumulated weight of those numbers tells a different story. Over 60 years, more than 9,000 workers have died in Ambull-related incidents. 9,000 human beings, whose lives ended in tunnels deep beneath a planet's surface, killed by creatures that should not have been allowed to continue existing once human operations began. The logs do not mention the screaming, do not describe what happens to a human body when Ambull claws tear through it, do not record the sound of stone cracking or the moment of recognition when a worker realizes the alarm is not going to end with an all clear. The logs are not designed to capture those details. They are designed to answer a specific question. Does the operation remain cost-effective? As long as the answer is yes, the work continues. Resource extraction in hostile environments requires calculating the point at which losses exceed gains. This is not controversial. Even the most humanitarian theorists acknowledge that some level of risk must be accepted when extracting resources necessary for imperial defense. The controversy, never stated openly, but present nonetheless, is where that line should be drawn. On Excavatum 7, 312 workers die annually from Ambull attacks. If we include all mining-related deaths, equipment failures, structural collapses, accidents during transport, the number rises to approximately 470. The total workforce is 9,400. This means that any given worker has a roughly 5% chance of dying in any given year. Over a 5-year contract term, the cumulative probability of death approaches 23%. Nearly 1 in 4 workers will not survive their contract. These numbers are known to the administratum. They appear in annual reports, risk assessments, and long-term operational projections. They are not secret. They are simply not emphasized in recruitment materials or worker briefings. Workers learn the real odds through experience. They watch the gaps appear in work teams, see the shuttles arrive with new workers who look too young and too confident, count the names that stop appearing at devotional services. They do their own mathematics, and they continue working because the contract is binding and the alternatives are limited. A worker who refuses duty faces penal servitude, which typically means assignment to even more dangerous work, frontline guard regiments, penal mining operations on death worlds, or service in reactor maintenance facilities where radiation exposure is measured not by safe limits, but by how long a human body can function before cellular breakdown. The system offers no exit except through completion of the contract term, death. These are the only paths forward. Some workers find a kind of grim peace in this knowledge. The choice has been made for them. They need only endure. Others experience it as slow suffocation, a life compressed into an increasingly narrow tunnel with no light ahead. Both responses are rational. Both are, in their way, correct assessments of the situation. I have presented the facts of life on Excavatum 7 as clearly as the available documentation permits. Workers extract adamantium and promethium from beneath a planet's surface, while creatures adapted to sense vibration hunt them through the stone. The work continues despite high casualty rates because the Imperium has determined that this loss rate is acceptable within strategic resource considerations. These are the mechanics, the systems, the decisions made by institutions operating according to their design specifications. But systems are abstractions. The reality of Excavatum 7 exists in the bodies of 9,400 human beings who wake each day knowing that today might end, with the ground opening beneath them. They do not have the luxury of analyzing the situation from strategic distance. They cannot calculate acceptable loss ratios when they are the loss being accepted. They descend into the earth. They work in silence. They listen for alarms. They survive or they do not. And the Imperium notes their production totals, adjusts supply chains accordingly, and continues the endless work of maintaining humanity's grip on a hostile galaxy. There is no moral to extract from this, no lesson about courage or sacrifice that would not ring false against the reality of standing frozen in a tunnel while something vast moves through solid stone toward you. There is only the fact of it, the existence that workers on Excavatum 7 inhabit, the bargain they never agreed to, but must honor nonetheless. The ground beneath your feet is solid, except when it is not, except when it becomes teeth and claws and darkness rising, except when the most fundamental assumption you possess about physical reality turns out to be conditional, subject to violent revocation by creatures that have no concept of mercy or fairness or acceptable loss. The workers know this truth in a way that no one who has not lived it can fully understand. They carry it in their bodies, their movements, the careful way they place each footstep, even when walking on the surface in sunlight, far from any tunnel. They have learned what the earth is really made of, not stone, not solid matter. Hunger and darkness, and the silence between the alarm and the thing that comes after.